You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. Hello there, and thank you so much for joining me today for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. My name is Felicia. I am a self-care specialist as well as a certified astrologer, and every week I come here to share a little bit from within. I'm recording this on a Wednesday morning after a very busy few weeks. You haven't heard from me during our regularly scheduled programming. We usually release a new episode every single Tuesday, but this summer I'm taking just a little bit of space, trying to get away from that kind of hard and fast, like regimented routine and allow myself just a little bit more space. It was something that I felt like I was really needing. And one of the things I'm actively working on in my life is giving myself the things that I need. It sounds so simple to say it out loud like that, but I think for so many of us, we struggle to give ourselves the things that we need. You know, we feel the burnout coming on, but we keep grinding. We feel ourselves exhausted, and yet we stay up late and schedule more and more into our activities, and we don't give ourselves rest. We feel sick, and instead of drinking water or slowing down or visiting a doctor, scheduling an appointment with a body worker, or etc., we just keep pushing through. It is actually extremely challenging, I think, to give ourselves the things that we truly need. And this is a process we're all working through in some way or fashion. Some of us are much better at it than others, and I am somebody who wants to be a lot better at it. And so I definitely feel like I have some work to do for sure. And I would say that it's a practice, right? That's one of my favorite lessons in becoming more mindful and studying yoga has taught me. I look back and it's lessons from my entire life, the value of practicing. We are not meant to be good at things right out of the gate, right? There's joy in the journey. There's value in practicing something. It takes effort, it takes focus, and not just when you're learning a skill like piano or a sport or cooking or a craft. Also, behaviors require practice. So nurturing ourselves, being willing to say no, working through the fears of letting other people down, or even just entering new phases of our life that require us to have skills that we haven't cultivated before. There's nothing wrong with us if we're not good at things right out of the gate. The thing we have to measure ourselves against is, are we willing to learn and are we willing to practice? And it's funny that I'm sharing on this right now because I'm about to share with you a story of my birthday was this past weekend, and we had a very busy weekend, and there was a full day where we experienced 2 graduations back to back, and I want to share with you what that day had me thinking about. And I will say that it very much connects to what I was just saying around allowing yourself to be present and to be in the process of being a learner or being a student, right? So we'll get to that here in just a moment. But first, I do want to just share a little bit of what's been happening astrologically. Last week on June 21st was our summer solstice. So we are officially in summer. Summer, it begins on the same day that the sun moves into the sign of Cancer. So for the next month, we are in Cancer season. Cancer is our cardinal water sign. Cardinal signs are known for being the initiators. They bring the start of a new season. There's a lot of forward energy. This is a good time to set intentions, to get things going, to lead, whether you're leading others or leading yourself. As a water sign, Cancer moves a little bit slower. It's much more intuitive, meaning that there is space right now to slow down, to go inward. And part of what that means is not just isolating yourself, but being with people who nurture your spirit, right? Spending time with family, spending time with your closest friends, spending time even with things that nurture your soul, like good podcasts or books, information, right? Cancer is also a time for nurturing your environment. So if you've needed a little bit of space to refresh your rooms, your decorations, to change things out, change things up a little bit, this can be a good time to continue to do that. Or if you've experienced a lot of change during Gemini season, so the month prior, this can be a good time to say, okay, now things have changed. Now what's going to make me feel comfortable here? You can kind of work on that aspect of creating more coziness in your life, more space to slow down, to enjoy, to connect with other people. Now, when it comes to the lunar cycle, we had our last new moon on about 10 days ago as I'm recording this. So it was on June 18th. And since then, we've kind of been building up towards the next full moon, which happens on July 3rd, early in the morning, July 3rd. So you might look at like the night of July 2nd into the morning of July 3rd is a really good time to step into that full moon energy. And just a reminder, full moons are this culmination of lunar energy. So it can be time of major celebrations. You might want to be really celebrating the 4th of July that night, right? Like getting a little bonfire going or having time with friends, doing a cookout. You might feel really creative and energized, maybe doing some house projects. Or you might feel like you just need to release stuff. If you find yourself feeling really grumpy around that time period, it could be a good time to either just sleep more, go out and exercise, listen to some music, let yourself really emote. You might even feel yourself crying. Crying is a very common thing. And crying should be normalized, but I think especially during the full moon, we can get a little bit more full, like emotionally full, and we need a release when that happens. And crying is a really important way for our bodies to release. This full moon is going to be in the sign of Capricorn, and actually it's very interesting because the moon is at home in Cancer, which means when the moon is in its opposite sign of Capricorn, it's not comfortable there. We actually call this being in its detriment. So there might be a little bit more of that added friction with this moon, because while the sun is in Cancer and we have all of these cozy and warm and feeling and intuitive and emotional vibes, Capricorn is like secretly sensitive. It likes structure. It likes very practical, being very serious, while Cancer can be much more playful, much more imaginative. And so there can be this friction in how that emotion gets expressed. So I would just say be very open to yourself. Be willing to slow down over the full moon. I know that sounds so cliche. And honestly, this might be a good transition into the rest of the podcast today, because it is something that I have been thinking about very much. To share a little story about this and talking about slowing down. On my birthday last week, Dave and I went out to this really beautiful restaurant that's just off this marina. Actually, it's only like 5 minutes from the house, which is pretty incredible. But it was our first time there. We're sitting out, we're looking at the lake and the trees and the mountains, and we're looking at all these fish in the water. And it was it had been an interesting day because, one, we both had to work all day, and then we were trying to get ready for this birthday weekend. Now, part of this pressure of this birthday weekend is my fault, because I love birthdays and I love the idea that they're this very special time. And the truth is, like, Dave and I have not had any time to be really intentional with what that looks like. You know, we kind of put some vague plans on, like, I said I was going to work a half day, and then it ended up being a full day. I did take all of Friday off, but we had a lot of family stuff coming up that day, and then we were going to do the weekend. And anyway, the point of that is that as we sat down to dinner that night, I think, one, we were both very tired. And part of this tiredness is not just being physically tired. It's being so mentally and emotionally exhausted and drained because of moving across the country. You know, I think I said this a couple months back when we first moved here, and I was talking about how I think there was going to be a delayed reaction, right? Like it was all going to hit me later. And in some ways, I do think that is happening now. But more so, I feel like the delay is in just the like sheer exhaustion from everything that has to get done, and it's not slowing down. And so as we got our little mocktails, because with Dave's illness, he can't have any alcohol, and I'm not a big drinker anyway, so we got some special birthday mocktails, and we gave a toast. And it was, to more joy in the next year, more abundance, more being in alignment. And Dave looks at me and he says, and to more downtime. And I thought, oh gosh, it's such a good word, because that so deeply aligns with my desire for more space, right? But this is something, again, going back to practicing, that I need to practice, because if you don't build in more downtime, you're not going to do it. And I feel myself, just as a side note, I feel myself really struggling with that even this week, because there's just so much to do and I don't know where you draw the line. So it brings up this question on, how do you slow down? How can you not be so cliche about that and actually invite that into your life? And I think that the answer there may just come from mindfulness. Like, instead of looking at everything as this huge thing that you're tackling, or all of this stuff you have going on, even if that is true, even if that is something that you're feeling, instead narrowing it down to what's happening in this exact moment. In this moment, yes, there's a lot of things going on today, but in this moment, I'm just looking out this awesome window at this view of this beautiful tree, and sharing a bit from within with people that I am so grateful are in my community. That's all that's happening right now. And what's come before this, or what's about to come after this, it doesn't matter, because I can be in this moment. And I think this is a really big part of slowing down, is not letting yourself get caught up in what needs to come next or what just happened. And sometimes in that process, it takes a little bit of time to transition. Actually, the last yoga class that I posted was about giving yourself time to transition. And we worked on this, inviting this into our yoga practice. It's such a great place that you can work on these skills, truly. But even in your life right now, like, make it a commitment to be in this moment. Look around you. Notice what you see. Notice what you hear. Notice what you smell. Notice what you taste. Notice what you can feel right where you are. Distill this moment down to just what you're doing right now. Try to, when you feel really overwhelmed with things, without space, try to take your mind's ability to wrap it all into multiple things, into multitask. Try to take that out. Slow it down. Let yourself have the space that you need. And again, one of the biggest tricks to this, when I think of slowing down, I tend to, like, in my everyday life, I'm like, I need to slow down. I need more downtime. I keep thinking of that as though it has to be like an entire day or an entire weekend or an entire week where things just feel good or have all this energy. Guess what? That is very unlikely to happen right now, at least for me. I don't know about for you, but there are many times in our lives where stuff's going to be going wrong. Probably the times when we need to slow down the most are the times when things aren't going awesome in every category of our life. We're either really working hard at something, we're meeting a challenge in some way, we're trying to level up, we're experiencing some contraction, right? There's nothing wrong with those moments. But to have the expectation of, well, slowing down means that everything's good, we can't conflate those two, right? It's okay to allow yourself that space and to meet yourself where you are in this moment, knowing that it may not feel like a vacation. It may not feel like all of these like happy, easygoing moments, right? You still have life to deal with. But I think that's the trick, is that when you actually allow yourself to slow down and come into the moment, suddenly things get better. suddenly even the hard things don't feel as overwhelming, or they don't feel as like, what's the word, like inflated, kind of like big, they don't feel so intense, because you're viewing them as just one thing at a time, and you're able to isolate it and see it and practice it and feel it and be in the moment. So, all right, well, that was kind of a little bit of a side tangent. I will say, going back to this weekend, one of the things that stuck with me the most is on Friday morning, we went to a pre-K graduation. This was for Dave's niece, and it was so special. It was so sweet, and honestly, I really loved it, because it's been a really long time since I've been at events like that. When I was just out of high school, my sister was still in elementary school. I remember going to a lot of events like that. I worked with kids all through college, so doing lots of plays with kids and all of these things. And the older that I've gotten, the less I've been around some of those moments. And so pre-K graduation, it was so sweet. They had all of the kids lined up in their like caps, or their little caps, their graduation caps, these really cute like little tie-dye shirts, and they lined them all up. They sang 2 songs, and then they had them each be presented, like walk across the stage while they said what they wanted to be when they grew up and what their favorite part of school was. And then they got their little diploma and went and sat down. And it was so, so sweet. And, just hearing, I spent a lot of time while I was sitting there just watching this experience unfold, watching parents looking at their kids, noticing the kind of things that the kids were saying that they liked and that they noticed. One little kid, when asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, he said, "I don't want to grow up. I just want to stay little." And of course, that was so sweet. Everyone giggled. And but just thinking about the heart of that child, and the heart of like what's important to kids, right? Those kind of things, what they're noticing, what they're seeing, it's so valuable. And then later that day, we had another graduation, a high school graduation. And suddenly, like in the exact same day, I was seeing these kids that were 4 and 5 in their graduation caps suddenly turn into other kids that were 17, 18, 19 years old in their caps and gowns, graduating high school. And it was the strangest experience to have this both in the same day, because I literally felt like this metaphor for life, right? Like 1 second, you're literally looking at these little kids and suddenly they're adults. And, just the vibe of how much gets accomplished in those, 13 years from the time you walk across the floor or the stage at pre-K graduation to the time that you're graduating from high school, and how much you experience and how much happens in your life and how much you have to figure out the whole world, right? In fact, it made me feel like, oh my God, like 13 years is just such a short amount of time, which maybe it is and maybe it isn't. But I found myself just even reflecting more on that moment of your life when you're graduating. And there are times in our lives, I feel like high school graduation is such a pivotal one. And it's interesting astrologically, because around that time in your life, around 18 years old, you go through your North Node return. And what your North Node return usually brings for you, this happens every 18 years, is, are you in alignment with your soul's purpose? And for many of us, what we do after high school kind of sets us off on an adventure for that, right? We either join the workforce or we go to more school and we start really focusing on a path, a direction. Maybe we meet people, maybe we become in a relationship, or we become a parent. Maybe we go out on attempt a specific career. Maybe we choose where our energy or our soul starts to want to focus on and express itself. And the interesting part is that as I watched all of these kids at graduation, I saw and heard, because they had 3 different graduates do a speech, I heard such amazing thoughts on the summary of, where life has taken them up to this point. All of the things that they felt stood out to them, that meant something, and that prepared them for what they're about to do. And I kind of thought to myself, it's kind of sad that we don't have more moments like that as we continue to get older that force us to reflect on where we're at. I think, of course, college graduation is a huge moment like that. And that can happen at all different points in your adulthood. Mostly, I think for many people, it happens earlier, closer to high school graduation. And then the things that usually happen after that are, maybe like leaving or coming to a new job. Maybe like a birth, right? Like new life coming into your life, or even with death, like that kind of the ending of an era. But even then, even though you might experience some parts of those things with other people, those things become much more individualized. While at high school, you're really experiencing this with other people that are informing your experience, that you feel like they know what you're going through. And after that, I feel like, not that life has to get a lot lonelier, but in a lot of ways, there's not the same kind of community. And sorry, I'm just putting some of this together as I'm reflecting on this, because I hadn't quite connected that piece of what I was feeling that night. I will say that this day that I was experiencing this, I did feel just a significant amount of, so many things. Like, in some ways, regrets around things that I did or didn't do during that time of my life. I also felt just this immense amount of like passion and concern around making sure that those little kids, those little pre-K kids, get the chance to be whatever they want to be, whatever they can be, that they have all of the resources possible to know that they can achieve, that they can go experience things. I think for me, I'm very, grateful for my family and the choices that were made in my life. I'm very grateful that I ended up being switched from a private school to a public school in 9th grade. That was a very important thing for me. But I will say that you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, I think this is very true. And my heart is I'm getting kind of choked up thinking about this, in the sense that you can't know you want things that you don't know are possible, right? Or that you don't believe are possible. And what tends to happen is, at some point in our lives, between the time we're, 4 or 5, maybe even earlier than that, and the time we're 18, we start to take on is a better word. We start to take on all of these beliefs about what's possible, about who gets what, about what kind of people are out there, and it's something it happens so slowly and so fast, all at the same time. And for many of us, I don't know anyone who I was raised around that was raised with this idea of being careful about what we believe, right? Because a lot of the stuff that we take on and we start to believe comes from our parents, comes from our surroundings, it comes from our environment. So if you are in an environment that says you can't go very far, you're not going to make a lot of money, you will live that, right? If you come from an environment that says you need to go to school, get a job that you're going to work and slave away for 40 hours a week, and you're going to work and not be that happy, just to have downtime and try to decompress so that you can go back to a job you don't like, you're going to live that out. Unless you, somewhere along the way, get exposed to something that opens your mind and asks you to think differently. And you, in that moment, are open enough to let your beliefs start to shift, to let your beliefs start to change. And so maybe if you're up for it, I think I'm going to do this later today, is just start to reflect on some of those beliefs that, and again, we're not blaming anyone. We're just saying somewhere along the way, this is what I started to believe. Distill it down and then start to track which beliefs have shifted over the course of your life and which ones that you're so grateful shifted because it brought you to that next place or to where you are now. I will say, well, one thing that I am very grateful for is somewhere along the way, I think my parents helped me to understand this, is that you can always change. Change is always possible. And I do think that set me up for constantly being open to striving for the next step, striving towards new beliefs even. Because having that in your energetic field, that you are not going to stay the same, that is probably one of the things I am most grateful for. And I would say every year around my birthday and every year around New Year's, usually. I mean, it would be nice if I said every new moon that happened, but probably on the biggest level, on my birthday and on the new year, are times when I just check in and I am consciously intending for what else could be possible. What is not feeling good? What do I need to shift? What am I ready to experience? Where am I feeling like I am blocked? I think even just being willing to ask yourself these questions is something that we all should do. Because again, it's like you picture yourself back at that high school graduation and you say, though that was a time in my life where maybe I was actively wondering of what could come next, when you feel like your whole life is still ahead of you. And I guess I'm just kind of feeling sad in a way that we don't feel or take that same intention as we grow older. And yes, it would be nice to be experiencing that with other people, because maybe it would help us feel like we're not alone. Maybe it would help us feel like just that reminder, even just to do it, to spend the time doing it. And that maybe it would help us feel like anything is possible. Maybe we'd be inspired by the people around us. But what I will say to you is that you may not have that same mechanism to feel or think that way, but you have everything you need to be able to do it. To think that your whole life is still ahead of you. I mean, maybe that depends on how you want to view life and where you're heading. But what if you felt that? What if you believed that you could still go after new goals, that it wasn't too late, I think there's something important about that. And I will say, wherever this hits with a bit from within you, I hope that in a way that it's inspiring, or at least gets you thinking in a direction around intention settings, or even around what needs to be let go of, so that you can start to crave out some space for some new intentions. For me, I feel like I've gone through this huge change in my life, right? Moving across the state, stepping into a brand new career, and some other personal new changes going on that are wonderful. And for me, I would love to say that I'm a butterfly right now and I'm just flourishing into a new life, but I don't feel like that. I feel like I'm still in a cocoon. And so the need for downtime, the need for space, all of this is so important, but it's only going to be important if I let myself receive the nourishment from that. So that's something I am intending to practice. It's something that I know is going to help me as I start to envision and reevaluate what I believe right now and what I think is possible for the rest of my life. So with that, we will close today with a card drawing, as we normally do on these every episode. This is from the Super Attractor deck by Gabrielle Berenstein. I really have been loving this deck. Usually keep one on my desk throughout the week. So this will be the card for the day, maybe for the rest of the week. We'll just see how the universe wants to contribute to today's conversation. Directing my focus onto what's thriving creates more of what I want. That's beautiful. It's amazing. Isn't it amazing how sometimes these card drawings just so like crazily connect with what we've been talking about? I love this, and I love this added idea that it's not just, being mindful, right? And considering what you believe in, but shifting in focusing on what's going right? Where are things thriving? That is going to create more of what you want and take you out of those places where you feel drained all the time, exhausted. It's so easy and overwhelmed. I say this from experience, that it's so easy to stay in that place when you feel those things, because those things are so valid. I've been feeling a lot of that lately. But I will say it feels so much better when you focus on what's going right. So this is definitely going to be sitting on my desk today, something I'm going to be incorporating into work life and personal life and everything else. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week ahead. I'm not sure when I'll be back, but I'm definitely within the next week or two. I love this podcast. I love checking in with you. I love sharing a bit from within. And I know that it does mean a lot to so many of you. So thank you for bearing with me while I take some of this space and figure out life a little bit. And I'm excited to reconnect with you again soon. Until next time.